So what's this one all about? Well, the change in definition of crime. Sounds a mouthful, but it basically means how some things used to be counted as a crime and aren't anymore, and some things were never counted as a crime and they are now. Here it is in the specification. It's actually in all of the periods, but it's in the bit between 1900 and the present day, the modern day, where things change the most in terms of the definition of crime. That's the wording you'll get in a question, by the way. That's why I keep using it. Well, we're concentrating on the industrial period and mostly modern period, and the first one in at number 1 is the Witchcraft Act of 1735, which made it no longer illegal to practice witchcraft, ending the witch craze officially and once and for all. One you won't find in the textbooks is the Cruelty to Animals Act of 1835. I've only found out about it today. But it was the first change in the law designed to protect animals from any form of cruelty. It was actually aimed at things like bear baiting, dog fighting, that sort of thing, which people used to bet on in dodgy pubs. But it was the first step. Like with a lot of these things, it was strengthened over time. But it was, before 1835, legal to do what the heck you like to animals. After 1835, the definition of that changed. The first change regarding cars was the Road Traffic Act of 1930, which brought in early anti-drink driving laws. Now, as I've looked it up, I think I would still be able to drink 6 pints of beer and still be within the law by the terms of that act. If I drank 6 pints of beer, I'm telling you now, I would be not fit to drive. So there were early laws, but it also introduced MOTs, driving licence, some speeding laws as well. Like with many of these, as I've said, later on in time, things strengthened, the law changed. But it was an important first step. And of course, this was the point at which the definition of crime changed. That's why 1930 and the Road Traffic Act is such an important thing to know of. Definition of what changed as a... silly man. The definition of what counted as a crime changed again in 1920, because in 1919 you could take and sell whatever drugs you like, but no longer, because there was the Dangerous Drug Act. Again, this strengthened later on, most famously with the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act, because this first initial one didn't include all drugs, and the punishments were fairly lenient. The 1971 Act included lots more drugs. It changed so you had Class A, B, C drugs, and it changed the punishments depending on the seriousness of the drug that was involved. So another change in the definition of what was a crime. An important change in definition is the Sexual Offences Act of 1967, which meant it was no longer illegal to be homosexual. But it didn't make things perfect for people who were homosexual, because there was still discrimination. So things had to change. And in 2003, the Employment Equality Regulations Act made it so you couldn't discriminate against somebody because of their sexuality. And in 2003, the Marriage Act meant that people who were homosexual, well, there were allowed to be same-sex marriages. But it was 1967 where the definition of that thing changed. It was no longer a crime to be homosexual. In 1964, you could have been as racist as you liked. But in 1965, 68 and 75, with the Race Relations Act, it became illegal. Those different acts did things like making it illegal to discriminate against people because of their race in jobs, in housing, and that sort of thing. Again, like with all of these, it was strengthened later on. So in 1994, it became illegal to incite racial hatred. But yeah, so that as with everything, the change in the definition was early. The strengthening of the laws came later after that initial change. So there's actually two changes in the definition of what constitutes a crime here. In 1990, it became illegal to do hacking of other people's computers and to spread computer viruses. In 2017, the definition of what became a crime regarding computers changed because the people providing the internet became responsible for stopping us being able to view illegal content, things like child pornography, that sort of thing. So there's two changes in that one. And finally, one that you should recognise, a weird one. It became illegal to refuse to join the armed forces during the two world wars. That's such a really obvious one in terms of this whole concept of changing definition. By definition, you could choose whether or not you wanted to be in the armed forces. And then the definition of the crime changed so that it became illegal to refuse to do it if asked to do so. All because of changing circumstances of the country, of course, with the world wars. And there's 8 ways in which the definition of crime changed since the start of the industrial period.